We already know that Junior Colson, Michigan's leading tackler for the last 2 seasons, 95 tackles this year, will be moving on. He announced today there are probably more decisions coming. There'll probably be one while we're recording this. That'd be just our luck. But he's going. Zach Zinter on the offense, no surprise at all, but makes it official, declaring for the NFL draft. Keegan will do the same. Blake Corum will do the same. Though we know those are coming, but some key decisions coming up. So I guess let's start with the biggest one, and that is J.J. McCarthy. Chris, you alluded to it earlier, but it's kind of odd because everyone assumed that if they won the national championship, it would be because he kind of lit it up. And they were able to do that. And that would also rise his stock at the same time. So 1, you'd accomplish your biggest goal, what you came here to do. And 2, your stock would never be as high. He played well, and maybe not as consistent as he would have liked to. And again, he's as happy as anybody they won. But it's kind of an interesting spot because they did win the national championship, but he didn't totally light it up. He played well and made some really big plays in the CFP and obviously throughout the season. So it's an interesting spot. And I think if he decided to come back, from what we've heard, there's NIL that would be there for him as well, and I think that could play a factor. I don't think it's going to be the primary thing for any of these guys, but the fact that if there is, part of them that wants to return, they know that they're going to be taken care of, which is really important.
Yeah, I think it'll be a primary factor for a couple of them that might not have NFL futures like J.J. McCarthy's, right? If somebody's going to give you a bag for $1 million or $500,000 and Michigan's not going to match it, you got to do what's best for your family at some point too, right? And now Michigan does a great job taking care of its players afterwards, with the Michigan network and getting them jobs and everything else. Look at Antonio Bass working in New York on Wall Street with Dave Pearson, right? It comes to mind. Antonio Bass could have been a 10-year NFL guy and blows out his knee, and guess what? He's doing just fine. So guys like that, Jamar Adams is another one that comes to mind. So there's that to think about, right? But to me, J.J. McCarthy's the big one, and we've got something on him today about what's going on today, and it's kind of a big deal, right? And he's got a decision to make, and you could tell he was torn, guys, when they came home and everybody was chanting 1 more year. He goes, "How can I leave you guys?" And I do think, and I do believe that some people in his corner are saying, "Hey, you've accomplished everything you need to accomplish here." What were his final numbers, by the way, in terms of passing yardage, fellas? I want to see that
right now
because we did something before the season. How many yards will J.J. McCarthy throw for this year? We all weighed in, and I don't think he got to $3,000, did he?
He was 9 yards short, 2,991 yards, 22 touchdowns, 4 picks
in 15 games, right? So I think I picked 2850 if I'm not mistaken, and everybody's like, "Oh," and I said he's still going to have a great year. Everyone's like, "You're an idiot. If he has a great year, he's going to throw for 2850, and they're only going to be playing 11 or 12 games and blah 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 blah." But it's not just about him; it's about his receivers as well, right, fellas? And I know he had Colston Loveland and AJ Barner had a big game against Michigan State, and but they did not have that elite group of receivers. If he had a Braylon Edwards and a Jason Avant and Steve Breston as his top 3 guys, then I would have said he's going to be up there around 3,500, and you turn this guy loose, but that just wasn't the case. So, and he still had a great year, and he's still going to be a first-round pick if he does decide to go. I would love to see him come back if it's in his best interest only, because as I've said many times, this kid is different. He's special. He comes from a special family. We got to spend a little time on the field with him after the game, Clay. Down-to-earth parents, and just it doesn't get any better. And I'm going to miss him, man. I'm getting choked up just thinking about this group of guys and covering them and how good of kids they are. And to represent the alma mater is just fantastic. I feel like Rich Eisen, talking about it, and the best in the business, the GOAT. So, but I do think they'll see a few more guys leave, but I do think some guys will come back. I said I think Donovan Edwards will come back, and I think you'll see an outstanding defense next year. Everybody's talking about the big dip that's coming for Michigan football. You guys they can win a lot of games with great defense, fellas, as we've seen, and this is going to be a great defense again next year.
Well, Ohio State fans would have you believe that all the super seniors are leaving, so the run is over, right? Not ignoring the fact that most of this team's, the core of this team is either sophomores and juniors. So I mean, we'll see what happens with JJ. I thought that, when you look at his season in general, when they needed him to win them football games, or when they played teams that had porous pass defenses, and these teams were gearing up to stop the run, he took advantage of that. It goes back to that pliability we were talking about earlier, where Michigan finally built itself. And when you look back, and again, I'm not comparing the two guys, I'm just saying, back in 2021, When you look at that Georgia game, Georgia completely took away the run, and Cade McNamara wasn't able to do anything. Now, it's a little different when Bowling Green is loading the box to stop the run or what have you, but I thought that they did a really good job tailoring this offense to what JJ does well, given that they didn't have the wide receivers that Washington or Ohio State had. It's not a huge deal that, again, I don't hold any of that against him. I think when you flip on the film, you see a guy that had limited dropbacks, but made the most of them. He was one of the most efficient passers in all of college football. And, I can talk myself into this team making another run at it next year if he decides to come back. But I also think too, that I think the NFL values him a little more than, the draft nicks on Twitter do. I think that, certainly he could be a first round pick as early this year, but, the argument could be made that he might be, the second, third, maybe even the first quarterback off the board next year. So a lot for him to weigh. I assume this draft deadline is on Monday. So I think the decisions are going to come hot and heavy here pretty shortly, but that's the most consequential one right now is what your quarterback winds up doing.
It is wild. I know he was hurt for most of these games, but the last 6 games of the year, only one time throwing for more than 150 yards and could be in the first round. And I think he absolutely could be. And really someone, I wouldn't think it would be a bad pick if you took him in the first round. Could be second round as well. So you're right, AB. I mean, it's a really good and top heavy draft class for quarterbacks. Next year, he could be the guy, at the number 1 spot. But obviously, you're going to have a revamped offensive line. You're going to have a new receiving core as well. So that's something to consider if you're J.J. McCarthy. But yeah, Junior Colson goes, Zach Zinter goes. More guys will announce one way or the other in the coming days. Carson Barnhart told Chris at the Rose Bowl that he's going to move on. Still watching Trente Jones, Drake Nugent, Quentin Johnson, maybe an underrated one in the defensive backfield. Roman Wilson accepted a Senior Bowl invite, but still can obviously come back. Makari Page has an extra year. Braden McGregor, Jalen Harrell, Miles Hinton told me that he's coming back. AJ Barner, also Senior Bowl guy. Donovan Edwards, we discussed. Rod Moore, I think, is another one that could be key. He played good enough to go and be a high pick at the end of the year, and I think his stock would rise if he decided to go. And once people watch more film of him, kind of the better moments, but he doesn't have as much on film as maybe some of these other guys because he was hurt earlier on in the year. So that's one to watch because I don't think his stock's going to be that great when he assesses it now, but could rise throughout the process. But I'm sure he'll make the right decision either way.
I do want to say Drake Nugent did tell me that he was probably going to declare. So that would be one to watch. But again, they can come back to these guys now with the money cannon that they've got. NIL, they've reached. We talk about that as well. And they can say, look, you got till the 15th to pull out. You know what? This is what we're offering you. Let's run this thing back. And if they get enough guys to get in there together, then, who knows?